people associate it with the luxury of all brands.
But I always was like, I will be a waste of a person if I am not in fashion. So I have been married to Neiman Marcus. I am almost too loyal to a fault.
Take a break, go breathe, meditate, because you don't ever get it back. Welcome to the Alex Perry on Fire podcast. And with today's guest, we are going to hopefully learn a lot about the fashion industry and a brand that is iconic worldwide, but especially in Dallas. And I think there's so much to learn, just the whole mindset of clothes, fashion, from someone who's been with Neiman Marcus for 17 years. So Jodi Kahn, welcome to the Alex Perry on Fire podcast.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Excited to have you. I've always known from when I moved to Dallas that Neiman's was this staple, and then worldwide staple, and people kind of associate it with the luxury of all brands. I know when I was younger, like that's where people wanted to work. If you wanted to be in fashion, Neiman's was kind of the top. Could you share with the audience just how you got into the industry and kind of what that journey's looked like to where you are now?
Sure. So I grew up in a retail family, so I knew it's something I wanted to do in the retail industry, but tried to figure out my way through internships and whether it was marketing or on the buying side. And just like you said, Neiman Marcus is the pinnacle of luxury fashion. I had never been to Dallas before, applied for the program in 2008. I went to school on the East Coast and like I said, never been to Dallas, but had to work at Neiman Marcus. And this was a goal of mine since I was in high school and knew that this was something I had to at least try. So I got the interview, came to Dallas for my, series. It was an assessment, a 3-day process back then of, determining if it's the right fit, both for you and for Neiman's. And so got the job, started in August 2008 and have been there ever since. So started in our executive training program, which we still have today at Neiman Marcus, and have had 9 different jobs in 17 years.
Just working your way up the ladder?
Yes.
You said 2008. That was a trying year.
I
mean, that's when the market kind of...
Yes. So when my training class started, we were 32 people. And along the way, not everyone actually was able to keep their job. We went through a lot of different changes at the company. I feel very fortunate. I kind of got through 2008. And actually on the other side of that was some of the greatest learnings I didn't even realize about the industry. Really starting out at such a trying time in a luxury market was a very interesting kind of first entry into the industry.
From an earlier age, was fashion like your passion? Was that something you wanted to always be in?
So I mentioned I grew up in a retail family. My dad worked in retail for his whole career. My parents met in retail. They were both buyers. So there was something always, we would talk about these things at our dinner table and looked at, little tiny numbers of performance. And my dad would try to explain to me, he was not in the luxury business, but it was something that always piqued my interest. But in terms of kind of the luxury fashion, I was always that little girl that had to have something new for everything and was obsessed with getting dressed in a full outfit, full accessories, new dress, new everything. If I didn't look good, if I didn't like how I looked, I just had the worst attitude. And I think from very early on, that was something that just was, very obvious in my life, that I always was like, I will be a waste of a person if I am not in fashion. So it was something my family noticed very early on. And then I think I came to realize that I can actually run a real business in this industry. And it's not just about pretty clothes. And, we're running, hundreds of millions of dollars business. And I think that's what kind of excited me, is I can turn this kind of passion into a real business.
Just so the audience can understand, like 17 years at one company. Again, I can relate to that. I've actually been at Ali Beth Allman, similar, 18 years. What was that like? And just in terms of, quickly going from now where you're at, what you do for Neiman's, but along the way and the resilience to get there, right? You just said you went to 9 different kind of jobs, right?
I think there's a few things. One, I always say it's about the people and the product. So the people is what has kept me there for 17 years. I feel like it is my family. I have grown up at Neiman Marcus and building those relationships and, meeting so many of my mentors that are still people that I, really cherish the relationships I've built with them throughout the last 17 years. And they've really helped guide me to figure out what are those 9 roles, where should I go along the way. Since I was in high school, I said I was going to be the CEO of Neiman Marcus. And it is something that I was like, okay, every role I take, I better be making the right moves. But, I think along the way, I've been in human resources. I worked at our last call division when we still had off price. I've worked in planning. I've worked in buying. I have a lot of cross-functional relationships. And I think through that, it really almost feels like I've worked at several different companies because I've had a lot of different experiences in the 17 years. So it's something that, although I've been at one place for my whole career, I've been given and earned a lot of different roles throughout there, a lot of different responsibilities and things that have made me feel like wasn't ever stagnant. I was always constantly learning something new, being challenged, working with new people, new bosses. And then, of course, the product. You obviously have to love the luxury industry. But I think also learning to understand our client has been something that in the last few years, I would say that we really honed in on all of the data analytics and the client data and understanding how to get the client to come in more frequently. What do they want to see more of? What do they want to see less of? Everyone's always talking about experiences now. So how do we create different strategies to bring people back into the store? Neiman Marcus is one company that we still do a huge business in brick and mortar, so in 4-wall stores, not just online. We have an incredible online business, but I think people come to Neiman Marcus in our stores for a fantastic experience. And so how did my role play into that? How can I help, build that experience for them when they come into the store? And it's through the assortments, right? So curating the assortments and making sure there's product that people want to buy. Most of these people don't need anything. They want things. And how do you curate an assortment for someone who, feels that Neiman Marcus is the authority in the industry? So when you're the authority, you want to make sure that you're giving people a trusted assortment of product that they can walk away feeling really good about it.
I think with recent news, we're seeing how important Neiman's is, not just as a brand, but kind of what it represents in people's lives. Even the opportunity to get together as a family or friends or whatever it may be. How do you hold that as maybe like a responsibility to your job or working for a company like that?
I think part of the reason why I have my identity so tied to Neiman Marcus is because it is such an icon, and it's something that it feels like I need to live up to the standard of Neiman Marcus. And you mentioned the recent news of the downtown store closing, and, Stanley Marcus walked through those halls, and, that is something that I feel like we all, hold with the utmost respect. And it feels like that's what has made that building so important, the number of experiences and the fact that that's really where the luxury industry, really began here in Dallas, Texas. No one thought that there was an opportunity for this industry to be based out of Dallas. And so, I know it's so sad to see the store close, and we're really optimistic about the future of Dallas and Neiman Marcus. North Park is in a shopping mecca, a huge footprint for us. But I think holding the Neiman Marcus standard in such high regard for me is something that I feel like is why I've kind of created it as part of my identity and part of my persona.
Yeah. And obviously, if you're going to be tied to something, why not something like that? But is there an element when sometimes you're like, I got to have my own persona? I can't be held to something that is really professional.
Yeah, sometimes my dad will tell me, Jodi, it doesn't say Jodi Kahn on the door. It says Neiman Marcus. It's okay to, identify with something else, or, I will get very heated or very upset if someone says something bad about Neiman Marcus. And I think there is a point where you do need to realize, like, this is, I think because they were people and they, those are real families that are, still around, that everyone wants to really respect the brand and the store. But I think it is important to make sure you're like, okay, this is a professional institution and not something I need to necessarily bound myself so tightly to. But like you said, if it's going to be something to bound myself to, it's not a bad choice. So.
Yeah. Well, I feel like just of recent, that's what's come to the forefront with brick and mortar, with the downtown Neiman's, is it's become such a big deal to the public because it was an experience.
Yes.
Where most of us, for the longest time now, have associated shopping with online or not really walking and experiencing it or traditions.
Right.
And that's kind of been brought to the news because what you just said is it's more than just a shopping trip. It's an
Yes.
experience to see the different styles. I've read a lot of the articles where they're like, this is where some big brands kicked off, right? And if you got your clothes in there, that
It's a
it
huge
meant
deal.
something,
Yes.
right? It used to mean something. I mean, I spent time with you. I know you just got back from Fashion Week. Can you explain to the audience what's, a lot of times for the general public, or at least for me, you see Fashion Week and it's an opportunity to see a bunch of attractive models walking down the runway, and no disrespect, but seems to be sometimes some out there outfits, right? You're like, does anyone really wear this, or where do you wear this to? As good as it looks on them, you're like, would this look good on me? But there's obviously a purpose to it, an extreme purpose to it. So maybe kind of explain that role you have now in that job and what that purpose is.
Yep. So there's definitely a lot of common misconceptions about the industry. What does Fashion Week think? What does that mean to other people? People think immediately about Zoolander or Sex and the City or The Devil Wears Prada. And while some of that is true and there is some reality to that, there is a huge business that we are operating behind that. And yes, we get to experience incredible venues and, supermodels that truly are celebrities in their own right. And, what we care about is the collection, right? How does it impact the business? So we're going to the shows in New York, London, Milan, and Paris. The calendar comes out. We determine which shows we're going to. So I'm kind of taking you back a little so you can understand what the process is. And so we get the calendar, we identify both the big brands, the small brands, the emerging brands, maybe brands we don't even carry, but we would like to know more about. We're constantly, on the lookout for what can excite our customers. These people are, given experiences, and our customers are all over the world at all times. So how can we give them something that they haven't seen before? So we curate our calendars for the 4 different fashion weeks, and then we attend the shows. And while we're watching the collections, yes, all of these beautiful people walking on runways and in some of the most beautiful places I've truly ever seen. They build something out of nothing, and oh my gosh, you're transported to the middle of, what looks like Dubai, but you're sitting at a fashion show in New York or in Paris or something. And they really do an amazing job of transporting you so that you understand the collection and what the meaning of the collection is. And then while we're watching the show, we're thinking about, how will this resonate with our customer? What will this collection do for the brand? Will this make the brand move forward? Is this going to just be a collection where we're maintaining the brand? We're not looking for any growth in that season. How will we curate the assortment for Neiman Marcus specifically? And as just the way you shop, I'm sure you notice on different websites and in different stores, there's different product from the same brand. Because we know our customers and we know what's going to resonate with our customers. So at Neiman Marcus, we know she's very feminine, she's sophisticated, she wants to feel elegant. So what within the assortment that you're seeing on the runway, how does that translate into what we do at Neiman Marcus? Different than some of our competition or than a boutique, because a boutique has a lot less floor space. So how can you curate the assortment differently, but still understand the collection?
But then, for me, as I'm watching that, what constitutes a trend? Where are you like, okay, this is something that could take on, or are you leaning on also looking at the crowd and listening and hearing everything that's being said about that to say, okay, that might work, that might not. And you just came back from this. So what are the trends we're going to see from?
So I just came back from Fall Fashion Week. So that won't deliver until starting in September. So I think there's also a common misconception about what we just got back from is what we're going to see immediately. But obviously in the industry, you need to be 6, 9, 12 months ahead to make sure for production purposes and all of the kind of logistical things. But I think, I sometimes hesitate to talk about trends because at the end of the day, we all want to feel good, right? So you want to wear things that make you feel good. However, every single season, people ask me, what are the things I have to have for the season? What are the must-haves? So I think there's an opportunity to kind of hit on some of those trend items, but also things that resonate with you. And like you mentioned earlier, some of the things that do walk down the runway, it really is supposed to be dramatic and it's supposed to be over the top. Those aren't necessarily things that we are wearing in our everyday life. But again, it helps bring the collection to life. So, talking about spring trends, there's a lot of things I think that people are, wanting to wear right now. The weather is finally changing, at least here in Dallas. People are getting excited about, buying new things for spring. So, and then we'll see some of those evolve into fall trends as well.
I mean, I'm looking at the screen right now of some trends you sent us, and it says,
the Dusty
Pastel
Palette. You got it.
Palette.
So color callouts are really important in fashion. I think it's an easy way for people to understand a trend. So here, the dusty pastels are whether it's a butter yellow, lilac, sage green, pistachio, pale pink. I think one here that is the quote fashion it color for this season. I had mentioned to you earlier, I had talked to the New York Times last week and it was about butter yellow. So butter yellow in the Chloe look in the middle is kind of fashion's it color. It feels very sophisticated and elegant. It actually pairs back really well to a lot of neutrals. And so people like to have a color of the season because it's something that feels very easy to kind of translate into their wardrobe.
Okay, so this is a little bit more, I wouldn't say out there because I don't have fashion great vocabulary, but it seems like
just a little more extravagant.
Edgy.
Yes, so sure. We call it more is more and less is a bore. So it's really about the paillette detail, sequins, feathers, texture, color. I think one thing to note here, while some of these feel a little bit more out there, when you pull them apart, and if you're just wearing the jacket, maybe not back to the skirt also, you're just wearing it with denim, it feels much more approachable. And we try to remind clients of that all the time of, don't get intimidated by what you see on the runway because all of that actually comes apart. But I think it's important also to know you can wear sequins and color and bright things and feathers during the day. This is not just something that you can wear at night. Really have fun with it. And a lot of people that follow fashion trends, love to kind of truly put together an outfit every single day.
Are the brands collaborating? I mean, if you saw Fringe or something with 4 different brands at one show, would you say, okay, this is it this year? Who's coming up with that, or how does that happen? Because also you said it's 6 months ahead of time as well, so a lot can change before it's even launched.
Right. So some trends are repeated season after season because they're so impactful in the industry. And people ask me this all the time, like, how do you know? And, for us, it is seeing it repeated over and over. And if you also see it in New York, London, Milan, and Paris, or even in just 2 cities, you're like, okay, there is some strength behind it. And you also have to think about, people don't realize a lot of things that come from a trend perspective also could be from some other worldly thing happening. So we've had a lot of crazy things happening in the world in the last few months, years, whether it's, through the economy or through the LA wildfires or through, we had a huge election in America. A lot of fashion trends and the way designers feel is emulated through those trends. And because all of these designers share kind of this creative passion, they end up sort of being influenced by very similar things. And then through the way they're build their collection is how they all look a little different, but they have some sense of similarity. So there might be fringe in multiple collections, but through different ways, some in accessories, some in skirts, some long fringe, some short. So it could be also other worldly events that I don't think people outside of the industry realize. We're actually being impacted by many other things outside of just like, oh, I really like the color yellow.
Yeah, how they're seeing the world.
So
what would you say in your career was the biggest bust where you're like, this did not work out?
Oh, that's a really good one. Let's see. Sometimes I think when you try to get too crazy or anything that just isn't comfortable, that is really where we see something not work out well. So, I'm trying to think. I can think of a lot of crazy things I've seen, but nothing that was necessarily like a total bust. It really, I think it goes back to people wanting to, there's some sort of ease behind it. If that ease isn't there, they're like, that's really great, but not for me.
is it just, and as I look at all these, again, it looks great on them. Is it just targeted marketing to make you feel empowered, right? To make you feel confident that one of those looks you could pull off, or just the idea that if I see this, I'll go into a store and find something that gives me a little bit of confidence,
So you definitely hit on a couple of things. I think there's definitely that moment of feeling inspired by something. I want to emulate that. That's something that resonates with me, whether it's a color, a trend, a silhouette. But also there are the people that truly follow fashion and it's something that they're like, I want to have something from the product collection from, 2017 and, whatever it might be. So I think there's a lot of different ways to look at it. But when you go and buy something at the end of the day, you want to feel good in what you're wearing, right? We know there's a natural connection between looking good and feeling good, and you naturally perform better, you feel more confident, you have more self-esteem when you feel good about what you're wearing. And there's a lot of different reasons why people make purchases. Is it an investment purchase and something that's going to stand the test of time? Is it something that's more of the moment, like the butter yellow or the extravagant jacket? You want to feel on trend for the season. So there's lots of different reasons why people make a purchase. And I think that's what makes my job so fun and what we do at Neiman Marcus so fun, because we can play into all of those, right? Whether you're looking for a timeless cashmere coat that's going to last for years to come, or you want a dress because you're going to Cabo for the weekend. We have lots of different end uses and there's a lot of different reasons people walk into the store.
And what is your exact role or job at Neiman's for that?
So I oversee all of women's designer ready to wear. So I, in one part of my job, so make sure that everything in the women's designer area, my team is curating all of those assortments. And then I also oversee the fashion office. So oversee all the trends, all the editorial, some content, anything that's being photographed that we are going to be marketing. And I do that for all women's categories. So at the end of the day, I sort of oversee all kind of things women, whether it's contemporary, designer, shoes, bags, really making sure that we're telling a story through all of the collections for the women's categories at Neiman Marcus.
And so for people who are in the business and designing fashion, from someone now who has an ultimate say on whether they get into a store of this magnitude, what is it that you would recommend someone say, okay, really concentrate on this or focus on this, or if there are pitfalls? And you've said no, I'm sure you get asked a lot of time and there's a pressure to get brands in there through connections. What does that look like?
I think at Neiman's, the number one thing is quality, right? People are coming to Neiman Marcus for a quality product. They want to make sure that this is going to stand the test of time. I also think there's something to be said about the craftsmanship of it, right? So, what makes this item special? And a lot of times that's also the point of view on the product. Do you have something different that's offered that you're not going to find from someone else? Or what, different take on it? Is it some sustainable material? Is it a new type of silhouette? Is it different end use? You used the word edgy before. So is it something that's offering a different perspective that we don't all often see in the market? So I love talking to new designers. We often, pick up a lot of new brands season after season. Some will be with us, forever. And some we also learn about each other, and maybe it's not the right fit for Neiman Marcus and it's also not the right fit for the designer, and that's okay too. But I do think it is a great way for a brand to test and learn so much, because we do have so many clients walking through our doors, shopping online any given season, and you can really determine, what silhouettes are working well, what fabrics are working well, things like that.
Yeah, and I can hear it in your voice. You've been at Neiman's for 17 years. Is it just the passion you have for, for apparel, for women's apparel, for your job that's kept you in it? You mentioned liking the people, moving up. I mean, has it been a perfect storm to get you where you're at, or were there moments of I got to change, or I need something that's different, or I need to work for myself, or whatever it may be? Or I'm asking you, has a brand ever come to you and said, lead me to the promised land, I'll hire you? What does that look like?
So I think for those who know me, I have been married to Neiman Marcus. I am almost too loyal to a fault, where I'm like, I could never dream of being anywhere else. Because I do feel like we have the formula right, but that doesn't mean that we haven't made mistakes along the way, and myself as well, right? But I think, there's sort of a combination of the perfect storm. I also have grown up in a household where there was no choice but to have the strongest work ethic that ever was possible. So if we were going to set a goal, and you must set a goal, you set the goal and then you were to achieve it and then overachieve it. And what's next after that? So, also along with 9 jobs in 17 years is a lot of pressure, because everyone's always like, well, what's next? And you're like, I just got this job. I'm not sure what's next. But that is something that is common, especially even just in my personal life. My family and friends are always asking me, what are you going to do next? Or do you want to go out on your own? And it's really not ever something I've really thought about going out on my own, because I do feel like to work at a place that it does feel like kind of the pinnacle of luxury feels like, why do I need to do this on my own? I have everything I've ever, wanted in my professional life, and I'm not done. So I feel like there's still more to chip away at in my career.
Yeah, and from someone who can relate to 18 years in one industry and grinding and what I would like to say earning way up the top, for me at some point it did come at what expense, right? Like for absolutely at what expense. I noticed that you've got a engagement ring on, so obviously there's some good balance in there, but it sounds like this was it. I mean, this you were married to it. Did you find this balance, or are you still working on this balance? Because what I want the audience to know, right, for people listening, is the fashion industry may be your industry that you're not in, right? I always say, go find something you love. You're obviously extremely passionate about it. That helps, right? And then find a place that you can grow, because that's helpful in the work environment, right? But also recognizing at what expense,
Of course.
right? At what expense is it due? Because the ride is part of the fun. I'm sure, and I'd love to hear, but I'm sure there's some crazy stories or great stories of fun and also hardship and et cetera. But for the people listening who said, okay, I want to go try this new industry, and I'm setting a goal, which your goal is lofty, and will take probably more time to get there. Where's the balance come from? Where it is, okay, am I looking after Jodi, right? And what's play for Jodi, right? Like, is this now all work and no play, right? I mean, for most people, it'd be a dream to go sit front row, right, for Fashion Week, but it's your job.
Right.
It's a little different.
Yeah. So I do think there definitely has come at an expense, and I've had to work really hard at finding a balance between the two. I think years ago, I was definitely all work and no play, and kind of looked back at, whether it was the end of the year or mid-year after a big trip, and I was like, wow, I just missed X, Y, and Z, and how can I avoid that in the future? And it wasn't overnight. Obviously, it was something I worked very hard at, whether, through talking to friends and colleagues and an executive coach, of figuring out how can I remove my full identity from Neiman Marcus. And I know it probably seems like my full identity still is Neiman Marcus, but like you mentioned, I recently got engaged and getting married in just a couple of months. And I feel like, that relationship has also helped me realize that I need to make sure there's time for me and us. And it's not really something I had made a lot of time for in the past. I happen to have a significant other that also works incredibly hard and works a lot of hours. So we really understand each other in that sense. But then when we do have the time together, it's being present and making sure that we're, making the time for one another. But, look, it has not been a straight line. I think the moments where I was like, oh, am I going to give up, and never, got too close to that. But then for me, it was, I need to learn something new. I need to challenge myself in a new way. And I think anyone starting in a new industry, switching industries, or in their same industry, it's kind of like continuing to further yourself and figuring out, that's kind of why I have made so many moves, because I was like, oh, I want to learn something else. I want to challenge myself, learn from new people. Every time you have a new boss, you learn something new about management skills, and really valued my time in human resources because I learned so much about people and, leading teams. So I think it's making sure that you're in the constant state of learning and making sure you're kind of finding your way and not staying stagnant, because I think that is when you can easily burn out, be working too much. And we all have gotten to that point before. I also travel a ton, so it's very easy to get burnt out. So what does that look like for me when I come back for a trip? You know, whether it's working out or spending time with my friends and family, really making time for those things, I have noticed is the way I kind of recharge after long trips. Whether I'm gone for 2, 3, 4 weeks at a time, sometimes when I come back from that, it's almost my worst nightmare. And people are like, tell me about the shows. Tell me what happened. I'm like, I just lived that. I don't really want to talk about it anymore. So, and then I get excited about it again. And then we have conversations like this that remind me how passionate I am about the industry.
Yeah, and you said it kind of stemmed from your family. You said that it was really ingrained in you from a young age. Set a bar and go get it. But that's a pattern, right? And I would argue like it is a healthy pattern to set goals and go for it. But again, just saying, at what point do you just play and enjoy it and enjoy it? And I guess maybe I'm projecting a little bit because for me, that's been my struggle with being in a job for 19 years and go is all right. How do I get back to just playing? And real estate's a little different than fashion, but just playing more and bringing that into my life. Especially, you have expectations now, and the expectation is every season to perform, right? Because it's a start over. It's a lot more difficult than other businesses because it's not like you can relax and say, okay,
just take it easy this season.
Yeah, too bad for y'all. Winter lines. You're gonna take a break.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a constant pressure to perform. At some point, are you rewarding yourself and saying, look what you've said it a little bit, but slowing down, be like, look what I've accomplished. Look where I'm at. And maybe what does that look like? Or is there a team around you that can at least now bring off some of this pressure and say, okay,
yeah,
I'm here.
I think it's definitely something I very honestly probably need to work on more. But I do feel like, part of what keeps us going in the industry is that there is always constantly something else. And so we don't even almost allow ourselves time to reflect on what's happened. And maybe that's just something in the industry that we've sort of, all of us in the industry have kind of not been like, oh, let's look back and we had the best sales performance ever in XYZ brands. We had X number of impressions in all of the editorial. We had, and when you stop and think, there are so many things, myself, my team, the company have accomplished in, we've been in business over 117 years now. And how does that impact the way we do business going forward? And to your point, there's a lot of expectations for Neiman Marcus. I hold myself to a high expectation. So, like I said, I think it's definitely something I probably need to work on a little bit better. But I think, when I come home from long trips, it's, kind of like shutting down at normal time. I go back to trying to, look at a 9 to 6 schedule, which typically now when you work from home, especially, you can be working 24 hours a day on your computer all the time. We always have a phone. And what does it look like when I don't do that? Everything still gets done. The world is still going around. We're just selling clothes and it's going to be there tomorrow. So it's okay to step back and, take a moment. I recently went to St. Louis. I grew up in St. Louis and my dad was being honored for something. And at the moment I, agreed to go, I was just stressing and so anxious about going because of work. And then I thought to myself, I got there and my dad could not have been happier that I was there, my sister was there, Brad came with me as well. And work was still there and everything was still going. And what's important was my family. And I've have to remember that because that feeling was so worth it that I need to make more of an effort to do those things, whether it's for my friends here in Dallas or my family who doesn't live here. That feeling is what you want to recreate over and over because it is worth, walking away from work for a minute.
Yeah, you got to prioritize. I saw it with my brother Dom, who was at Brinker for almost 20 years, corporate setting, and he loved the culture. I mean, he still loves the culture, but this idea that you could be going at all times and people asking for you, and people will take as much as you give, right? And so they'll, as long as you're willing to give it out, they'll take it. So you have to find that pace, the release in town, in town or out of town, obviously, and give that to yourself.
I think it's also, just to add to that, really important because I do have a large team. with a lot of young people that have just started in their careers. So I want to be a good role model for them also to understand that you can have success and a bit of a balance. And yes, working really hard and having that work ethic is extremely important, especially in, really in every industry, but I can only speak to my own. But I do think, they oftentimes will be like, oh, can I have 15 minutes of your time? I know you're so busy. I just want to ask you. And I love nothing more than to do that because I am a real person too, just like they are at 22 starting in their career. And I remember when I was 21 starting at Neiman Marcus and looking up to the people who I am now. And I think it's really important for your team members to also stop and reflect and talk about last week's great business. You guys ran a great business last week. Tell me about what you did and how can I help do that again next week? And so that I can be there for them as a leader and a mentor also.
Yeah, I think there's a strong correlation to people who've grown and succeeded who are giving back in that way. Because we've had a lot of people on the show who's like, look, I lean on my team. I ask them questions. I let them come to me. It's so important, 100%. Yeah. And also I think it's encouraged right now in this environment, take a break, go breathe, meditate,
yes,
do yoga, please, because you don't ever get it back. You'll never get back the first high fashion designer you signed up or launched or the second or the third or the 10th. You lose that because of expectations you put on yourself, right? And you're like, you lose the joy of it a little bit because of the pressure of it. It's just the nature or the expectation to perform.
And I always say celebrate the small wins because they're just as important as the big ones. And so, especially because I started during the recession, that was something the CEO at the time, Karen Katz, said, to all of us all the time. Celebrate the small wins. It's important just as much as the big ones is the little ones. And I really talk about that with my team quite a bit. So
yeah, I love that. Even with the podcast, when we first launched, first day, we'll never get that back. Milestones, and it's our milestones, right? It's our little things. Someone who owns a multi-billion-dollar corporation would say, "Who cares?" But it's not about that. It's what gives you that little joy. And I think you can take that into life. Honestly, I've learned a little bit more about that. Is like, being more present. You can celebrate those little things. You never know when you're gonna have a moment, right? And so to be present for that, to enjoy that, I see that much more. And I think it's lost when you're in this mindset of go, 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 achieve, right? It's just lost. So it's nice to hear that. I guess one more question, which I think is probably pretty prevalent in the industry, but I say AI, right? Because that's going to change every business out there for the most part. And this, we talked about brick and mortar and it's in the news. So I'll keep bringing it up. Like the iconic downtown Neiman's that's shutting down, that was told it was shutting down for a real estate issue that we don't know. But the point is the people that want it to be gone for some reason, right? I imagine that's going to be a big, it's kind of, not that we didn't know it, brick and mortar's been difficult for all retail. What's the world look like in maybe 1, 3, 5 years from shopping, from experiences? I'll tell you, I'm not the perfect example because I don't love going into retail stores and shopping. I am an impulse buyer. So if I see something like this jacket I saw at Stanley Korshak, wasn't looking to buy a jacket. I'm like, I like that jacket.
Because it made you feel good.
It makes me feel good. I thought it looked good on me, Yeah, and again, actually also, I felt like it was a new look. It's kind of interesting. Maybe the subconscious was like, come on, it's time. It's time for
change your wardrobe.
a little refresh in the wardrobe. And I know everyone shops differently. And I've also seen a lot of people, and it's more on the female side, just scrolling. And I don't know whether they buy or they return or whatever it may be, but what are we looking like in the future? I mean, I would imagine y'all have to be looking years ahead to be on top of this.
So I think we talk a lot about the concept of integrated retailer. So integrated through your phone, your computer, your store experience, and it is one shopping experience. So to the customer, they're expecting the same experience like on all channels. And so what does that mean for the future of, are you generating something through AI and looking at new outfit options on social and then through our website, and you're expecting that same type of experience in store? So kind of figuring out, we don't want to give up on our store business because it's so important to kind of the history of Neiman Marcus and the way our customer likes to shop, those experiences, but also we need to acquire new clients. And how does the new client like to shop? And is she or he really looking for a more AI generated experience online of saying, oh, you bought that jacket. What are all the other things that you might like based on that? And let me show them to you on yourself, because we have a photo and we know what size you wear, and we can actually look exactly, it can look exactly like you online. And so there's so many ways it can go, and there's so many levels of integrating that into the retailing model of how far do you want to take it. And it's all based on the data. You need the really good data about your client to understand what to offer them through AI. So, even through ChatGPT, if you ask it a question, if you notice, the more specific you are in your ask, the better response you get. So all of these women that are scrolling and clicking and then maybe returning or not buying, we know it was in your basket. So we know you like X, Y, and Z. And how do we use that data to make better informed decisions going forward, just to further enhance the shopping experience, both in person and digitally? And I think that's where, we will, in general, the industry will rely very heavily on the integration of, digital and, the data that will give us that.
And this is more of my question. I walk into these department stores, I see so much clothes, and you said it's seasonality. It's kind of sad to think, where do all these clothes go? And I know there's like discount, but like,
well, if we buy it properly, we have a really good sell through, and then we don't have a lot of excess. But we do have a few off-price stores still in the Neiman Marcus distribution. So we have 5 off-price stores, which will go there. And then, from there, that's the end of its life cycle. But that is why it's super important as we're curating the assortments. Our buyers are really experts in that, to make sure that we're doing to the best of our ability, buying the right things. But that's also a reason why when we pick up new brands, we're often looking at brands that are sourcing their fabric sustainably, or, reusing, goods from old seasons and repurposing it, cutting it, putting it back together. And you'll never know. It doesn't look like patchwork. You'll never know that this actually was previously used fabric. But I think especially the younger generation is very interested in a more circular and sustainable fashion cycle.
Love it. Because Alex Perry on Fire podcast, what fires you up on the daily? What gets you going?
I think every day is different. So that's what I love. Actually, that's what keeps me fired up. I don't know ever what to expect. We're constantly excited by our new clients, and the clients that I have come to know so well through our business is truly incredible. And keeping her excited and engaged and getting her something new every day, I think is, really a great part of my day. And then, of course, I would be lying if I didn't say, lately I've been super fired up, getting married in May. So very excited about my personal life as well.
Well, and you said her, and when you say her, for me, it thinks of my mom a little bit. Mother's Day coming up.
Yes.
For the audience,
I think it might be the biggest second shopping after Valentine's Day is Mother's Day.
Really?
So, obviously Christmas, but very important.
That makes sense, because this year I didn't get anything for Valentine's Day, but I've got to go find something for my mom.
Exactly.
Is there any trends or specific gifts we should be looking out for, or an idea for people listening for their mother?
Yeah, I think I feel like this kind of wellness idea, whether it's like a TheraFace, like red light mask, or a TheraBody. We know the TheraBody guns have been really popular, the PEMF mats, whether it's ozone therapy, weighted blankets. I feel like that's really kind of where the trend is right now, and some tool or device that she may not be buying for herself, but knows it would be something that she would really like, but maybe doesn't want to go and buy that for herself. So hopefully my mom's not listening. But I think that's something that I think we all would love to have.
I like that, because it's also a little bit generational. Like,
Yeah.
hey, trust me.
Yes, you need this. Yes, exactly.
And then lastly, we donate to a charity of your choice. So which charity would you be choosing today?
I'm going to choose Memorial Sloan Kettering. My sister had cancer in her early 30s. Thankfully, she is in remission and amazing. But we have, as a family, always been quite close with the charity and the hospital since then. So,
is that to a specific cancer, or is that?
It's the sarcoma. She had a sarcoma.
Okay,
so
cool.
yes.
Yeah. Well, we will
Thank you
gladly
very
do
much.
that. This has been fun. I mean, learned a lot about it. I think, one thing to finish is that for the audience listening, and for for people who are trying to get established in a business, right? I just love the idea that you had an idea, you had a goal set and you're working towards it. And I think what helps and what you just said, what fires you up, it's just passion. It's just an attitude. Um, and you said it's kind of been a little bit of your persona, um, but you embrace that side of it, right? It's not like when people ask you about fashion, you turn them away or turn them off. I think that's key. I think it's important. I know it just because we work out, and that's that will be brought up in conversation, but it leads to more and asking more, and then getting to know more about you, and it resonates on you. So it's been a pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Alex Perry on Fire. It means so much to me and the wonderful team that makes this all possible. I'm now passing the flame to you. Please follow, like, and subscribe so you can always stay up to date. Thanks again, and stay fired up.